The world usually makes a decent amount of sense, you know? Sun rises, tide comes in, Karen from the HOA finds a new way to ruin everyone's Tuesday. But as I'm hurtling through the air, strapped to what's essentially a souped-up, heavily armed jet ski with delusions of grandeur, sirens wailing like a banshee with a stubbed toe, and the beloved, ancient Lifeguard tower of North Beach zooming into view like a startled wooden giraffe, I have to admit, maybe my definition of sense has gotten a little flexible. Below me, I can just make out a tiny figure in a visor, arms flailing. That'll be Karen. Oh, this is going to be good. Or a spectacular disaster. Probably both. My money's on both. It all started, as most things do on North Beach, with a perfectly good morning ruined by excessive signage. I love this beach, always have. I grew up here, learned to swim in these waves, got my first disastrous teenage kiss under the pier, and probably swallowed enough salt water to qualify as a minor marine ecosystem. The Lifeguard tower, old, weathered, leaning just a bit to the left like it's had one too many, is the heart of it. It's seen more drama than a daytime soap opera and saved more lives than Karen has, that's for sure. So picture this. It's a bright, breezy Saturday. I'm down for the volunteer beach cleanup, coffee in one hand, trash picker-upper in the other, feeling vaguely heroic. And then I see it. The tower. Wrapped in garish yellow caution tape like it's a crime scene. A bright orange notice of violation unauthorized structure is slapped onto its sun-bleached wood. And there, standing guard with the ferocious territoriality of a badger protecting its last Cheeto, is Karen. Her real name is probably something bland like Susan, but in my head, and increasingly in the neighborhood's collective consciousness, she's simply Karen. HOA President Karen, scourge of fun, tyrant of the tide line. Morning, Karen, I try, aiming for casual, landing somewhere near constipated uncertainty. What's going on with the tower? She turns, her visor glinting menacingly in the sun, her blonde helmet hair, a marvel of engineering that I'm convinced is bulletproof, doesn't move a millimeter. It's an unauthorized structure, Samuel. She always uses my full name, like she's my disappointed third-grade teacher. An eyesore. And frankly, a liability. The Homeowners Association has decided. She says decided, with the kind of gravitas usually reserved for papal decrees or the announcing of lottery numbers. My brain sputters. Decided? Karen, this tower's been here since before the HOA was a twinkle in some overzealous lawyer's eye. It's where I learned to swim, for crying out loud. Nostalgia is not a building permit, Samuel, she sniffs. It's not up to current code. It obstructs the pristine, multi-million-dollar view for Lot 7B. That's Mr. Henderson, a very valued member of our community. And it encourages loitering. Loitering? I can feel a vein starting to throb in my temple. Karen, kids look up to that tower. Generations of kids. It's a safety beacon. We get actual riptides here. Dangerous ones. People sometimes, drown. The HOA provides adequate signage regarding water safety, she recites, like she's reading from a laminated card. And we have perfectly good emergency services a phone call away. This relic is unnecessary. She pats the violation notice. It's coming down, end of story. But it wasn't the end of the story. It was barely the table of contents. I've had minor skirmishes with Karen before, of course. Everyone in North Beach has a Karen story. There was the great picnic blanket infraction of 22. My blanket was apparently excessively vibrant and disrupted the natural dune aesthetic. Then there was the sandcastle height restriction mandate, which, I swear, she enforced with a tiny ruler. But this was different. This was an attack on the soul of the beach, So I did what any slightly too invested local with a functioning printer would do. I started a petition. Save the North Beach Lifeguard Tower, I called it. The response was amazing. Turns out a lot of people felt the same way I did. Old-timers who remembered it being built, parents whose kids learned water safety from lifeguards who'd once sat in that very tower, even some of the newer, wealthier residents who, unlike Mr. Henderson of Lot 7B, actually liked the rustic charm. I got over 500 signatures in 2 days. 500. Armed with my stack of impassioned pleas, I marched into the next HOA meeting, held in the oppressively beige community center that Karen had personally overseen the redecoration of. I think she had a bulk discount on beige. Next item on the agenda, Karen announced, peering over her glasses at a room full of people mostly trying to stay awake. The new pet waste disposal bylaws for the communal green space, Section 3, Subsection B, acceptable bag thickness. I cleared my throat. Excuse me, Karen, I'd like to present a petition regarding the lifeguard tower. She barely looked up. Her pen, poised over her meticulously organized agenda, didn't even quiver. This isn't on the approved docket, Samuel. But this is urgent, I insisted, holding up the stack of papers. Hundreds of residents want the tower to stay. It's a landmark, a safety feature. Your passion is noted, she said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that could curdle milk. We are currently discussing acceptable bag thickness. Brenda, you had a query about biodegradable options? And that was that, stonewalled. It was then I realized Karen wasn't just a stickler for rules. She had something personal against that tower. Or maybe just against anything that brought people simple, unregulated joy. A few days later, things escalated. I'd roped in a couple of my old lifeguard buddies, Mike and Dave. We figured if Karen wouldn't listen to reason, maybe she'd listen to, well, us, looking official and concerned. We were down at the beach, inspecting the tower, mostly just taking down the ugly caution tape, when Karen appeared, phone already pressed to her ear. Yes, operator, I need the police, North Beach. There are vandals destroying HOA property. Yes, it's that tower again. They have tools. The tools were a pair of safety scissors Mike used to snip the tape. Soon enough, a cruiser rolled onto the access path. Officers Miller and Rodriguez got out. Miller, older, with a perpetually tired look, sighed the moment he saw Karen. Rodriguez, younger, still had a spark of amusement in his eyes, though it was fading fast with every HOA-related call, I imagined. All right, folks, what's the hubbub here? Officer Miller asked, his voice weary. Ma'am, you said they were dismantling the structure? They were, Karen insisted, pointing a trembling finger at us. With tools, probably to sell it for scrap. It's a den of iniquity. A den of iniquity? Dave muttered. It's a wooden box on stilts, lady. The most iniquitous thing that ever happened in there was me forgetting to reapply sunscreen in 08. I stepped forward. Officers, we were just checking if it's structurally sound. Which it is. It's perfectly safe. And who calls a lifeguard tower a den of iniquity? Officer Rodriguez coughed, a sound suspiciously like a stifled laugh. Okay, Mr. Sam, is it? Technically, if the HOA has put up tape and notices, best to leave it be. This is really a civil matter. Just try to keep the peace, okay? All of you. They didn't take anyone to jail, but Karen looked smug. She'd won that round, and she wasn't done. The next morning, a fence appeared. A surprisingly sturdy chain-link fence, complete with a padlocked gate encircling my beloved tower. A new sign was attached. HOA property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and possibly fined for excessive sand accumulation on sidewalk. Okay, I added that last bit in my head, but it was totally in her handwriting style. A fence. She actually fenced off a piece of beach history. It was like watching someone put a parking lot on the Grand Canyon. I was sitting on the sand, fuming, watching the waves crash, feeling utterly defeated. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Tech billionaire unveils new personal water jetpack, the future of aquatic recreation. I watched the video. Some grinning dude in a wetsuit soaring over a lake like a low-budget Iron Man. Stupid, impractical, expensive. Then an ad popped up. Chaz's custom watercraft, we trick your ride, Raps Mods Mayhem. Local number. My brain, which usually just worries about whether I left the stove on or if my socks match, started to whir. A dangerous, beautiful, utterly unhinged whirring. What if, I thought, a slow, maniacal grin spreading across my face. What if the tower was inaccessible from the ground, but not from the air? What if it looked like an emergency? What if I could make a statement so ridiculous, so over the top, that even Karen's HOA rulebook, in all its beige glory, wouldn't have a chapter for it? Chaz's custom watercraft was tucked away in an industrial park near the marina. It smelled of fiberglass, ambition, and questionable decisions. Chaz himself was a work of art. Faded band tattoos snaking up his arms, Oakley sunglasses perched on his head despite the dim interior lighting, and a grin that suggested he'd heard crazier ideas than mine, though I doubted it. "Hey, Chaz," I said, trying to sound casual, like I commissioned ludicrous semi-aerial water vehicles every day. "I've got a project, a special project." Chaz leaned back in his chair, which looked like it had been salvaged from a speedboat. "Lay it on me, brother. If it floats, flies, or explodes, I'm usually interested." "Excellent. I need a PWC. But more. Think rescue. Think rapid aerial deployment." He raised a tattooed eyebrow. "Aerial? Like you want to jump it higher? We can trick out the engine, add some hydro flight gear, sure. Get you a good 10, 15 feet if the water's choppy." "Higher," I said, leaning in conspiratorially. "And I need it to look official, like a paramedic's jet. Red, white, maybe some flashing lights, the whole 9 yards. But, you know, for the water, and with a bit of significant upward mobility." Chaz stroked his goatee. "A paramedic jet ski that flies a bit? You planning on air rescuing a seagull from a particularly tall palm tree, my dude?" "Something like that," I said, deciding vagueness was my friend. "It's for a very specific, very stubborn obstruction. A community service initiative, you could say." He was quiet for a moment, then that grin reappeared. "An obstruction, huh? I like it. Red and white, you say, flashing lights? We can do that. We can definitely make it noticeable. The upward mobility part might take some creative engineering. And a disregard for several local ordinances. You got a budget for creative?" My wallet whimpered, but I nodded. Creative is my middle name. It's actually Bartholomew, but he didn't need to know that. Next stop, Valerie's Vertical Ventures and Vestments. It was a bizarre shop that sold both skydiving equipment and high-end theatrical costumes. Valerie, the owner, was a woman who looked like she could pack a parachute and critique your Shakespearean monologue with equal, steely competence. "Hi," I said, trying to project an air of calm professionalism. "I need, well, a parachute, a static line probably, something easy to deploy for a beginner, and also a paramedic-style jumpsuit. Very authentic looking, please." Valerie looked me up and down, her expression unreadable. "Skydiving lesson first, then we talk shoots, standard policy, and the jumpsuit. You going to a very specific themed party, or are you actually a paramedic with a penchant for dramatic entrances?" "It's complicated," I said, feeling my carefully constructed cool begin to crumble. It's for a community service project. High visibility, rapid response, accessing a restricted area. For the good of the people. It's about saving lives. From bureaucratic overreach and poor aesthetic choices. She stared at me for a long moment. I was pretty sure she was mentally calculating the exact G-forces my body would experience if she threw me out of her shop. Then, a tiny smile played on her lips. Bureaucratic overreach, huh? Okay, you've got my attention. Parachute lessons start Tuesday, don't be late. And the jumpsuit, do you want the reflective trim, or is that too flashy for your community service? The next few weeks were a blur. My savings account was hemorrhaging money like a gut-shot piggy bank. My diet consisted mainly of instant noodles and nervous energy. Chaz was a maniacal genius. He'd taken a sturdy, slightly used PWC and was transforming it into something that looked like it had escaped from a Bond villain's aquatic lair, if the villain had a side hustle as an emergency medical technician. He was jury-rigging a series of high-powered water jet nozzles, angled for what he cheerfully called vertical liftoff, or, a really impressive geyser. He was painting it a vibrant emergency red and white, and had sourced some surprisingly loud, and almost certainly illegal for civilian use, sirens. He'd christened it the Aqua Medic Angel. I privately called it the Alibi Evaporator. Meanwhile, Valerie was putting me through my paces. I discovered I am not a natural parachutist. My landings were less graceful descent and more uncontrolled plummet followed by an undignified sprawl. But I was learning. Sort of. She also tailored a paramedic jumpsuit for me that was so authentic I felt like I should be diagnosing someone. I bought a cheap pair of binoculars, a slightly dented megaphone from a flea market, and a deluxe first aid kit, mostly for show, but also because, given my parachute skills, it seemed like a prudent investment. I was also doing reconnaissance. Karen, bless her punctual, obsessive heart, did a beach patrol every morning between 7:55 a.m. and 8:15 a.m., like clockwork. This was my window. The wind, according to the 7 different weather apps I'd downloaded, was usually moderately cooperative in the early mornings. Just as things were starting to come together, an official-looking envelope arrived. Cream-colored, heavy stock. The kind of paper that screams, "You're in trouble." It was from Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, attorneys at law, representing the North Beach Homeowners Association, a cease and desist. Apparently, my continued harassment and attempts to undermine HOA authority regarding the Lifeguard Tower were not appreciated. It mentioned potential fines, legal action, and something about intentional infliction of aesthetic distress, which I'm pretty sure they made up. I called my sister, Anna. Anna is my rock, my voice of reason, the person who usually talks me out of doing things that will end up on YouTube with "fail" in the title. "Sam," she said, after I'd read her the legalese, her voice tight with a mixture of horror and exasperation. "A cease and desist? Are you serious? What on God's green earth did you do?" "Nothing," I protested, perhaps a little too loudly. "I just inquired passionately about the tower, and maybe started a petition, and possibly looked into alternative access solutions for vital community infrastructure." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Alternative access solutions?" Anna finally said, her voice dangerously calm. "Sam, she put up a fence. You're not Ethan Hunt. Just let it go. It's a wooden tower. It's probably got termites." "It's not just a tower, Anna," I exclaimed, pacing my tiny apartment. "It's about principle. It's about... Well, it's mostly about Karen being a joy-sucking vortex of beige rules and petty tyranny." "You're going to end up in jail, Sam, or wrapped around a flagpole. Promise me you're not going to do anything stupid." "Stupid?" I said, gazing lovingly at the nearly completed paramedic jumpsuit hanging on my door. "Anna, stupid is my brand. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? Famous last words, right? The next run-in with Officers Miller and Rodriguez happened at Slater's Inlet, a secluded part of the bay I was using for, let's call them preliminary propulsion tests for the Aquamedic Angel. Chaz had assured me the modified thrusters were mostly stable. I'd managed a wobbly 3-foot hop before nearly plowing into a surprised pelican. Apparently, Mrs. Henderson from Inlet Drive, a known Karen ally and avid birdwatcher, had reported suspicious, possibly dangerous experimental aircraft activity and a man attempting to weaponize a jet ski. Miller and Rodriguez did not look happy to see me. "Samuel," Officer Miller said, his voice flat. He gestured with his chin towards the Aquamedic Angel, which was dripping seawater and looking vaguely ashamed of itself. "We meet again. What in the name of Neptune's less responsible cousin is this contraption?" "It's a high-powered aquatic search and rescue prototype, officer," I said, trying for breezy confidence. "For swift water conditions. Very cutting edge." Officer Rodriguez peered at the extra nozzles Chaz had welded on. "Does it involve flying, Samuel? Because Mrs. Henderson was quite specific about the weaponized jet ski part. She also mentioned unnatural noises and frightening the egrets." "Weaponize? No, never!" I exclaimed, clutching my chest dramatically. "It's for saving. It's practically a medical device. That's why it's red and white. For high-visibility rescues." Officer Miller sighed, a long, slow exhalation that seemed to carry the weight of every ridiculous call he'd ever answered. "Look, son, I don't know what kind of beachfront hoedown you're planning with this thing. But if it isn't street legal, or sea legal, or, and I can't believe I'm saying this, sky legal, you're gonna have a much bigger problem than your HOA. Just be careful, and maybe keep your prototypes away from Mrs. Henderson's delicate ornithological sensibilities. We've got actual crimes to solve." They didn't confiscate the Aquamedic Angel, which I took as a win, but the warning was clear. The stakes were officially higher than my last property tax assessment. I had to pull this off. Perfectly. And soon, D-Day. Or, as I was calling it, Operation Reclaim the View. Sunrise was painting the sky in those soft, hopeful pastels that Karen probably found non-compliant with approved atmospheric color palettes. I was in a hidden cove a little way up the coast, the spot Chaz and I had picked for the launch. The Aquamedic Angel bobbed gently in the shallow water, looking absurdly magnificent in its fresh red and white paint job, the non-functional but very impressive sirens gleaming. I was zipped into my paramedic jumpsuit, the parachute harness feeling bulky and alien over it. My stomach was a churning cement mixer of coffee, adrenaline, and the distinct possibility of imminent public humiliation. Chaz was there, vibrating with an almost paternal pride for his creation. "All right, Aquamedic Angel," he boomed, slapping me on the back hard enough to realign my spine. "She's topped up with premium, thrusters are nominal, and the emergency glitter bombs are armed." "Glitter bombs?" I yelped. "Chaz, we did not discuss glitter bombs." He grinned. "Relax, rookie, just for dramatic re-entry, if needed. Now you got this. Aim for the tower, miss the palm trees, and for the love of all that's holy, try not to land in Karen's convertible. Sirens are a go on your mark." Valerie, ever the pragmatist, had simply texted, "Don't break anything you can't afford to replace, mostly yourself. Pix or it didn't happen. Good luck, liability Luke." Helpful as always. I strapped on my cheap headset, trying to channel some inner action hero. "Roger that, Command," I said, my voice a good octave higher than usual. "Initiating. Operation Reclaim the View." This was it. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped woodpecker. Karen's beach patrol was due any minute. The wind was, okay, a little gusty, but mostly in my favor, or so Chaz's $20 windsock indicated. It was a short hop, conceptually, over the small, rocky headland, then a direct line, maybe 300 yards, to the Lifeguard tower. 90 seconds. That's all the flight time Chaz conservatively estimated this glorified, over-caffeinated bath toy could manage with the extra oomph required to get me and my dignity, what was left of it, airborne. I took a deep breath, gave Chaz a shaky thumbs up, and gunned the throttle of the Paramedic Angel. The PWC roared. The modified water jet propulsion system Chaz had Frankensteined together kicked in with a sound like a hippo gargling gravel. It skimmed across the water, faster, faster. Then, with a jolt that nearly sent my teeth through my tongue, it lifted. I was flying. Sort of. It wasn't graceful. It was more like a startled goose attempting its first launch after a heavy lunch. Bumpy doesn't even begin to cover it. I was lurching, bucking, the wind screaming in my ears despite the helmet Valerie had insisted I wear. The sirens, oh God, the sirens Chaz had installed were loud. They were the kind of sirens that make babies cry and dogs howl 3 towns over. They were definitely attracting attention. "Yeehaw!" I heard Chaz yell faintly from the shore, his voice nearly drowned out by my personal aquatic symphony of chaos. There was the headland, a blur of green and rock rushing beneath me. I gripped the handlebars so tight my knuckles were white. Then the beach, my beach, spread out below me like a rumpled sandy carpet. And there, dead center, like a bullseye in a particularly weird game of darts, was the Lifeguard tower, still miserably fenced off. And there was Karen. She was frozen mid-stride on her morning power walk, visor askew, mouth agape in a perfect O of outraged disbelief. She was pointing up at me, the renegade paramedic from the sky. Oh, this was priceless. The sheer, unadulterated shock on her face was worth every cent I'd poured into this ridiculous venture. "Target acquired," I yelled into my headset, mostly for my own benefit. The Paramedic Angel, bless its overstressed little engine, was holding steady-ish. Then, a sudden, vicious gust of wind slammed into me from the side. The kind of wind that laughs at weather forecasts and delights in ruining perfectly good acts of protest/performance art. The PWC wobbled precariously. I was being pushed off course, away from my intended glorious landing on the tower's small wooden platform. I was losing altitude faster than Karen was losing her composure. Split-second decision time. The Paramedic Angel wasn't going to make it to the platform. But I could. Maybe. "Chaz, I'm bailing!" I yelled, hoping he could hear me over the sirens and my own panicked breathing. I cut the makeshift thrusters. The PWC, now just a very loud, very red and white jet ski, splashed down into the surf a safe distance from any swimmers, just as Chaz had sort of planned for its eventual, less than glamorous retrieval. My turn. I fumbled for the static line of my parachute, the one Valerie had drilled into my muscle memory. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. I yanked it. The chute deployed with a crump that felt like I'd been rear-ended by a cloud. I swung wildly for a moment, the world tilting and spinning. Okay, so the deployment wasn't Tom Cruise smooth, more like laundry in a hurricane. But it was open. I was descending, towards the tower. The landing. Oh, the landing. Let's just say it won't be featured in any skydiving training manuals. I was aiming for the platform, that small, sacred square of wood. But the wind, my old nemesis, had other ideas. I didn't nail it. I clipped the side of the tower with a resounding thwack, did an involuntary 360-degree spin that would have impressed a ballerina, and then landed, not so much on the platform, as in a heap adjacent to it. My pre-planted first aid kit, positioned for maximum dramatic effect, scattered its contents, a single Band-Aid, and a very old packet of aspirin across the weathered planks. The megaphone I'd so carefully brought clattered loudly, bounced twice, and teetered precariously on the edge. I groaned, every muscle protesting. Okay, so the landing was a solid 4 out of 10, with style deductions for the involuntary pirouette and the near loss of vital megaphone equipment. But I was on the tower. I was inside the fence. I was, for all intents and purposes, an officially sanctioned, by me, paramedic on a vital, if slightly unorthodox, mission. I scrambled up, grabbed the megaphone, and took a bow to the stunned silence below, which was quickly replaced by chaos. Karen was, to put it mildly, losing it. She was a vibrant shade of puce I'd previously only seen on exotic tropical frogs. She was yelling, gesticulating wildly, phone already clamped to her ear. I could just imagine the call. Yes, 911? There's a flying lunatic in a paramedic suit on my illegally barricaded Lifeguard tower. He's loitering with intent to rescue. The beach, previously dotted with a few early morning dog walkers and Tai Chi enthusiasts, was now rapidly filling with a crowd of onlookers. Phones were out, cameras were flashing. This was clearly the most exciting thing to happen in North Beach since that rogue wave stole Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning sun umbrella back in '97. I raised the megaphone, a feeling of pure, unadulterated, gloriously absurd triumph washing over me. "Attention, beachgoers!" My voice boomed, slightly tinny and distorted, but undeniably authoritative. "This is an official, safety and structural integrity assessment. The tower is now secured. Yes, secured for public well-being. Please maintain a safe distance. Your cooperation is appreciated. This is for your protection and scenic enjoyment." From below, Karen's shriek cut through the air. "Get down from there, you maniac! That's HOA property! You're disturbing the peace! You're unapproved, thoroughly unapproved!" I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. It didn't take long for the flashing blue and red lights to appear. Again, Officers Miller and Rodriguez trudged onto the sand, their faces a perfect blend of resignation and disbelief. They surveyed the scene. Me, perched on the Lifeguard tower in a slightly dusty paramedic suit, megaphone in hand, the Aqua Medic angel being inexpertly towed towards shore by Chaz, who was cheerfully explaining to a bewildered-looking beach patrol kid that it was all part of a highly advanced surprise marine rescue drill. Karen, practically vibrating with incoherent rage, and a crowd of at least 50 people, all filming with their phones and grinning like they'd just won a free churro. Officer Miller pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture I was becoming intimately familiar with. He looked up at me. "Samuel, son." His voice was heavy, like he was carrying the weight of all the bad decisions ever made in the history of beachfront communities. "You parachuted onto the Lifeguard tower, dressed as a paramedic, having arrived on a... What is that thing anyway? Because of a fence?" I beamed down at him, trying to look as innocent and civic-minded as possible. "Officer, just ensuring public access to vital safety infrastructure. Standard procedure for advanced civic engagement and emergency view restoration." "Arrest him!" Karen shrieked, finally finding some coherent words. "He's a menace! He used a jet! A flying jet thing. It was unlicensed and loud!" Officer Rodriguez leaned over to Officer Miller. I couldn't hear what he said, but it looked suspiciously like, "I don't even know what ordinance that violates. Misuse of a fake ambulance jet ski while impersonating a helpful person." Aggravated theatricality with intent to annoy an HOA president? After a long, sigh-filled discussion, during which Chaz tried to explain the advanced hydrodynamics of the Aqua Medic angel, mostly using hand gestures and whooshing noises, and Karen presented a detailed list of my alleged violations, including, I think, unauthorized enjoyment of public airspace, The officers basically threw up their hands. No actual laws had been seriously broken. Bent into a pretzel, yes. Made fun of, definitely. But broken in a way that required handcuffs? Apparently not. They issued me a minor citation for something wonderfully vague, like creating a public spectacle likely to cause bewilderment, and sternly told Karen again that disputes over fences and historic wooden structures were largely a civil matter for the HOA to sort out. They looked utterly defeated by the sheer, unadulterated weirdness of it all. As they left, I heard Miller mutter to Rodriguez, "Next time she calls about that tower, Rodriguez, you're taking it. I'm calling in sick. For a month." The best part? The footage. Oh, the glorious footage. At least 6 different angles of my dramatic, if slightly clumsy, arrival. Karen's operatic meltdown. The whole shebang. It went locally viral before I'd even managed to unhook my parachute harness. #Paramedic jet guy. #tower hero. #HOA Karen gets zoned again. #North Beach needs more sirens. The HOA was, to put it mildly, mortified. The story, complete with interviews with a grinning Chaz. "Yeah, that Aquamedic angel, she's a beaut. Got a few more upgrades in mind for her. Maybe some laser-guided sunscreen applicators." And a cautiously impressed Valerie. "Well, he didn't break himself, so I guess my training paid off. The jumpsuit looked good, though." Was picked up by the local news. Then came the twist I hadn't even planned. Someone, a disgruntled former HOA board member perhaps, leaked some emails. It turned out Karen's crusade against the Lifeguard tower wasn't just about her love of beige and her hatred of fun. Oh no. The tower, you see, ever so slightly obstructed the premium sunset ocean view from a new luxury condo development going up just behind the beach. A development for which Karen, in her infinite civic-mindedness, was allegedly receiving a rather hefty consultation fee for ensuring all HOA approvals went through smoothly. The liability and eyesore claims? Mostly smoke and mirrors to cover up good old-fashioned greed. That, as they say, was the nail in Karen's HOA coffin. An emergency meeting was called. Not by Karen this time. The residents of North Beach, armed with printouts of the leaked emails and links to the #Paramedic jet guy videos, had had enough. Karen was voted out as HOA president in a landslide of no confidence so overwhelming, I almost felt a flicker of sympathy for her. Almost. Then I remembered the fence. The new HOA president, a chill surfer dude named Bodie who thought my stunt was radically epic, man, immediately ordered the fence removed. He even organized a community fundraiser to give the Lifeguard tower a fresh coat of paint and some minor repairs. He declared it a cherished community landmark and beacon of righteous rebellion. Okay, I might have suggested that last bit. A week later, I'm back at the beach. The tower stands proud, freshly painted a cheerful non-beige blue. The caution tape and violation notices long gone. Kids are laughing and playing around its base. Anna is with me, shaking her head but smiling. "You're certifiable, you know that?" she says, nudging me, completely and utterly around the bend. "Hey," I say, grinning, watching a little kid point up at the tower with awe. Sometimes you gotta make a splash to clear the air. Or, drop in unexpectedly when the front door is locked. Anna rolls her eyes, but there's affection in them. "So, Paramedic jet guy, what's your next brilliant scheme for saving the community from itself?" I look out at the ocean, the waves sparkling, the salty air clean and fresh. The Aquamedic angel is currently in Chaz's shop, undergoing what he calls Phase 2 upgrades, now with snack compartment and optional seagull deterrent disco ball. Valerie has offered me advanced parachute lessons, for when you inevitably try something even dumber. Maybe I went a little overboard. Maybe I strained a few city ordinances and terrified a few egrets. But looking at that tower, standing free and proud against the blue sky, I can't help but smile. The beach is safe. The tower is safe. And North Beach is, at least for now, safe from Karen. And yeah, maybe I proved that one person, armed with a truly ridiculous idea, a modified jet ski with an identity crisis, and a surprisingly comfortable paramedic costume, can actually make a difference. Or at least make one heck of a story. Now about that unapproved community herb garden Karen was complaining about last spring. I wonder if Chaz does drone modifications that can deliver organic fertilizer with pinpoint accuracy. And maybe a tiny, defiant little flag.